All right, so now let's talk about one that I actually really, really enjoyed. It is not in my bottom five at all. It's a solid two. I watched this with my kids. We all had, we were all actually questioning why it was like in the top 10 worst movies of the year. John Cena.
Because I can tell you why.
Well,
So
let me tell people what.
pitch the movie, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you
Thank you.
why it falls.
I would love it if everybody that I worked with would actually let me host a show once in a while.
Wouldn't
Um,
that just be great?
yeah, I don't interrupt Johnny Carson. God damn it.
Well, they should have.
Anyway, so we're talking about Jackpot. John Cena. So John Cena's been in a lot of movies this year. Most of them were terrible. And I didn't want to do Ricky Stenicki. The guys over at Movies That Don't Suck already covered it, and it really wasn't on anyone's like top 10 worst list. So I was like, it's probably fine. There was another one that was on the list. I can't remember the name of it now. But this was the one with Aquafina. So I was like, well, okay, I don't want to do an entire podcast just on John Cena movies or a triple feature for that matter. So I got to pick one of these. And I figured, all right, well, this one with Aquafina seems interesting. Let's see how bad this is. So Jackpot is a 2024 action comedy film directed by Paul Feig, as we mentioned earlier, of Ghostbusters 2016 and Bridesmaids fame, and was written by Rob Yescombe. The film stars Aquafina, who's been in everything lately,
Who still
John
is not good.
Cena, Aiden Mayeri, Donald Elise, Watkins, Sam Ashgari, and Samir Liu, who is also in fucking everything lately. He shows
Yeah,
up
hang
in
on.
these movies. He also.
I'm convinced if there's one major takeaway I had from this series of movies, is that Simu Liu is kind of useless.
The film follows Katie, who is Aquafina, a former child actor who earns $3.6 billion lottery and must fend off people trying to kill her in a future version of California. Amazon Studios began developing the film under the title Grand Death Lotto. In March of 2023, Aquafina, Cena, and the rest of the cast were announced, and filming began the same month. It was released by Amazon through Prime Video on August 15th. It received generally mixed reviews from critics. It's about 106 minutes long, and it's got a 30% on Rotten
This
Tomatoes.
is this is another one that's too long.
Yeah,
Is part of the problem.
I would say what one of these that would have improved it is if they kept it to a tight 90 minutes. Let me say this, and then I will kind of just cede my time to you. I actually thought that this was a pretty tight, uh, well put together movie. They do the world building fast enough to where I understand what's happening and why things are happening, and then we can just move forward. I actually think that the Katie character has a really nice arc. They explain that everything and everyone in her life who has betrayed her, so she gets paired up with the last Boy Scout, who you're waiting for the entire time in the movie for him to betray her, and he never does. And it was finally nice to see in a movie, because we've talked about this so much, a modern youngish man be a hero, be chivalrous, and not turn out to be the villain. Like John Cena plays a what's the alignment?
Lawful good.
Lawful good man, hero. And it was nice. Like this almost had like Christian like film vibes, to where it's that
Apart from
whole.
the profanity and the violence.
Well, I mean, it was like wholesome in the sense of like good guys are good guys, bad guys are bad guys, and our lead goes on an arc of self discovery. Holy crap! It was a movie, a really nicely told movie. Yes, it's very busy, it's very frenetic, it's very violent. We knew what we were watching when we watched it. That was the assignment, and it carried it out kind of flawlessly. I laughed at times. My kids laughed. We were pretty well entertained through the whole thing. Even Jen, who doesn't necessarily watch the movies with us, but like she would occasionally turn from her game and be like, "This was actually a lot of fun. Like what little of it that I caught, I actually enjoyed." High praise coming from her. So like this is a solid two on a 3-point scale, where 1 is superior, 2 is in the middle, and 3 is uglies. This was a solid 2 for me. I really, really, really enjoyed Jackpot. Your witness.
Okay, I can tell you. Let me tell you why this movie falls down.
Okay,
It doesn't actually have enough story to sustain itself,
that's fair. And a lot of this is made up of fight scenes.
and unfortunately, those are repetitive.
Yeah,
And there's some decent style, which okay, that'll help. I don't like Aquafina,
sure.
so that's a personal thing. she and John Cena do have decent on-screen chemistry, and that's kind of important for this whole thing to work.
Mm.
John Cena is a very gifted comedic actor. You and I have been ringing that bell for a while
Yes, sir.
because it's true. None of this is my taste in humor, so I didn't laugh, but I'm not going to hold that too much against the movie. My biggest problem with this is the story is weak. The world is not uninteresting. Like the premise is pretty strong, but a premise isn't a story. And the story here is not sustainable over the runtime. There's a decent little bit of like lampooning modern Hollywood and modern California, but I don't know. Even that just kind of fails to land for me,
I
which
don't
is
know.
weird because normally trying to roast California is a
Well,
quick and easy way to my heart.
as a parable about man's inhumanity to man and our tendency to abandon our moral compasses and civilizing pillars, we just went through this with Joker. Um, when given sufficient enough pushes, here's the problem. It tackled the same subject as Joker 2019, but in a stupid way. And I'll give credit where credit is due. I think sort of the writers and Paul Feig sort of take on we are not good people by and large. We're kind of shit, and given the right amount of push in the right direction, and maybe not even a hard push, we're going to be murderous assholes to each other. It's cynical, but I don't know if that's wrong given given what I've seen in my life.
Well, as I mentioned before, I don't know if you heard me say it or not, but
Mhm.
the premise of this movie is actually fairly strong.
Right,
The story is weak because a premise is not a story.
that's fair.
And this does not have the story to sustain its runtime. The chemistry between Aquafina and Cena helps make up a little bit of that distance, but not enough to make me just. I could not watch this movie and their chemistry fill in the gaps in the story. Because there are
Mhm.
movies like that where just part of the joy, part of the experience is watching two or more characters play off of each other. And that needed to be a component here because of how weak the story is. And for as decent as their chemistry is, it's not
Well,
it's not Bill and Ted,
it's
right?
a lot of Aquafina kind of self-reflecting, like projecting on the John Cena being Teflon and it bouncing back on her and her going, "Oh, I'm a shitty person." The problem is her character isn't written well enough to make that more interesting or apparent. Like
Yeah.
it's there, but it's kind of flaccid.
It's there by accident rather than intent.
Yeah, it's not very strong. It's weak.
No, and once again, Simu Liu kind of worthless. I
Well,
mean,
also like his villain turn and everything. Like, so there's a thing in the movie where they eventually end up in the bad guys under the bad guys' protection, and it's under the guise of we'll protect you from the mob, but really we're here to kill you because we want the money too.
and
There's a,
at
there's
which point, when they reveal that, one just has to ask, why wait?
yeah
Like, what's the? And they never address this. They never address we're going to set up an elaborate scheme
they
whereby
they
we can.
they mentioned something about the reason why, like, it has to look like she got killed by accident. Like, it has to be
I'm
staged the right way, or we don't get the money. It looks too much like we killed her. They do say that.
It's just stupid,
Yeah,
and
I'm not arguing with you.
and
Also,
it
like, the whole thing with John, the reason why John Cena doesn't have enough money, despite the fact that he makes shit tons doing what he's doing, is he's giving it to the families of the soldiers that were killed in the mission with Simu Liu. And the big reveal, the evil reveal, is Simu Liu like killed all the other guys in their unit so that he could keep the treasure for himself. And it was like, okay, you were doing all right with this, and now you're just pulling fruit from the cliche tree.
there's I unlike other movies on this list, I don't necessarily regret watching Jackpot, but
You know what's the funniest line of this movie? What's his face? The Machine Gun Kelly, where they're like, it's like, oh, you're here for me? Like, yeah, we're here. And the implication is they're here to, the prostitutes, they're here to bang him, and he looks at Aquafina. He was like, "No, thank you." And he looks at John Cena, and you would turn my asshole into the eye of Sauron. And I don't know which dork wrote that line in this movie, but that got the biggest laugh out of me.
That was probably improvised because if you look at the outtakes, there's several other versions of
Okay,
that line.
okay, that's a funny line. I laughed hard at that.
Well, here's the thing about Paul Feig.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna let you do 80 million takes while you improvise things, and then he tries to take credit for the writing. So
Mm-hmm.
somebody eventually will stumble into. This is the worst way to go about both improvising, going a little bit off script, and you improvising a bit. And it's to just say, "Hey, go do a thing. Say the funny line, funny man." And then, okay, stop, reset, do it again. Say a different funny line, funny man. And we repeat this 12 or 15 times and then they find a line that they think works best.
Okay, I get. None of these movies are really like your bag, for the most part. When we get to some of the horror stuff that they may not have been good, you may not have liked them, but they're at least in your wheelhouse. Whereas Jackpot maybe isn't. But like I said, Jackpot was a solid win for me. I can see why critics didn't like it. I can see why it doesn't appeal to a lot of people. But for the most part, like I said, I don't think it belongs on this list. We talked at the beginning. There were movies we're not going to talk about tonight that should have been on this list in place of Jackpot. Like there's a few other movies I can think of that are probably far worse.
I think you and I have reversed opinions on this and Space Cadet.
Okay. Well, let's
just as a by the by. I think I think I am on that one where you are with this one.